For sure, for sure. And while you were talking, Kakoli, I was having a review of my own life, right? I've gone to mainstream schooling, mainstream language, and over the years, I've been, aspiring and also inspiring people to say we must have a different languaging, a unified code where humanity can work towards, right? Because everybody sees regeneration, sustainability, scaling in a different way, but it's a feeling and it's an imagination. And when I talk about scale, I'm only talking about scaling the consciousness and scaling the interconnectedness. And once that happens, then the change that happens will be creatively localized. Yes. But when they hit, say, when there is a need to get some help, there will be global connection. That mycelium will connect. Like in nature, resources flow from where there's a deficit, from where there's an access. So that mycelium will exist, and then the resources will flow, whether it's love, whether it's creativity, whether it's a solution, whether it's just tending to somebody with care and compassion. That should happen organically, like it happens in nature, support each other like a forest. But right now, our systems are disconnected and broken because what you mentioned, right? Because of extractive ways of being. We have interrupted natural flows, we have interrupted natural cycles, and we have created imbalances. And you and I are part of that system as an atom, right? And so the imbalance is in you and me. And the more we find our own inner balance and center, and everyday work on that, the mycelium and the connectedness in these corridors, I call them corridors and tubes of light, because it's just sound and light. Sound is how we are affirming in the world, how we want to see the world. Light is visuals and also healing light to flow through it. So each one of us, if we were beginning to imagine a better world, a more equitable world where resources are flowing easily, but for the resources to flow, we also need connections. So the work, I think, the work is to reconnect. And what scale is needed depends really on what is the scale of disconnection, right? When a human being needs to go through a healing journey, you can only heal when you know where the wound is. In a natural system, in a social system, in an economic system, you have to know the points where the disconnection is, where the disease is. So from the roots, from the nodes, then the nurturance and the regeneration can begin. So if you look at the global Ecovillage network, it is a mycelium. And why I say we are aspiring to be distributed and decentralized is just from a social process and a cultural process. We have faced colonization, capitalism, where people have been disempowered and their creativity and their imagination shut down. So can we create these systems where there's trust and there's collaboration, there's openness, where ideas come in, they're valued, and there are less hierarchies, and there's a natural emergence where people come together as groups, they have an idea, they experiment, they do things, they find something, they have an aha moment, right? And from that aha moment, whatever they are doing, if it's needed in the world, I feel that nature and just the collective evolution will support it, right? But there will be forces in nature that will also lend to atrophy, right? Because nothing is always growing, nothing is always, we will go through cycles. So to also remember that brings peace and solace, that not everything is going to be good and happy always, but just to be in the movement. And in yoga philosophy and everything we say, it's going to move in a spiral, right? You're going to go up, you're going to come down, your net nodes are going to connect. So I'm so happy you brought this in, because we were recently somewhere in a group and we thought we need to have this resonance project where we relook at the language. And we take languages from indigenous cultures and traditions that signify a feeling of connectedness, a feeling of love, a feeling of community, a feeling of sacredness. And it is not a language of a modern cultural education system, which is very limited. Sometimes it bypasses the heart. And this work of regeneration is a lot of the work of the heart, but it needs the hands to really power, the systemic change, the policy change, and many other things.
It's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? I don't think this is too much of a diversion, because language is the way we communicate with each other, at least one of the main ways in which we communicate with each other. And as as people who have been colonized, and it seems that a large majority of people on the earth have been colonized, unfortunately, or they carry the ancestral trauma of colonization from generations before them. And not only have many people been displaced from their lands, they have and their ecologies, they've also been displaced from the words and feelings and concepts of their own people's indigenous ways of being, right? Language being one of them. And I think I can speak for myself as a person who was never taught my own language in the school in an environment where with structured learning. I often feel quite disconnected from the way I imagine myself to be as a person, as a living being on this earth, from the words that I use, right? Even the language I'm using to speak to you, that is not my mother tongue. It's not your mother tongue. And yet we are having to express ourselves
Yeah.
in this foreign language that has been imposed on not only us but our ancestors and many many people around this world. So it's an interesting it's an interesting conundrum that I am not sure how to overcome unless we actually speak in our mother tongue, which many people don't know just because they
Yeah.
haven't had the resources to be able to learn it, especially indigenous peoples and settler nations.
Mm.
Um, it's a conundrum. It's being divorced from ourselves in so
Mm.
many different ways, right?
For sure.
I wanted
Sure.
to, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, but also please explain to us what a mycelium is. It's become one of my new favorite words, and I know it has something to do with fungi, I think, but if you could, yeah,
I think mycelium, if you looking at language again, really, should I explain it from the language of nature? Should I explain it from the language of systems, from the
whatever
language
you
of the
want.
cosmos? So a mycelium is just a web, right? So if you have and it's nice to leave people with imaginations. So if you were to close your eyes right now, let's do that. Instead of using language, let's feel into that space. So here's Kakoli and here's Amina. And we have an energy field around us. And a lot of us have experienced the energy field and we've read about it in many different practices, yogic, shamanic. And these energy fields are just tubes of light. And they're leaving our body. And there are energy fields in the tree, in the water, in the soil. And these tubes of lights are connecting with each other. And at certain points, these energy fields connect and there is a transmission and a node is formed, which gives us this, I would say in neuroscience, sometimes we call it synapses, right? Where information data travels. And so these tubes of light from our body also go into the earth. The earth has its own electromagnetic field. And it's believed that the cosmos also has its constellations, its stars, its planets. We have the five elements, which you, Kakuli, are very connected to, the Panchabhutas. And everything is communicating with each other through an electrical impulse, a field, creating a web. Quantum physics knows that. Um, and this is a mycelium. Under the soil, it's the roots of plants connecting with each other's trees. They call it the wood-wide network. They're microorganisms giving out these light and sound and converting, raw matter into energy for food. That's a mycelium. My heart talking to Kakuli is a mycelium. So there are micro level, atomic level mycelium happening in a matrix. If you want to go into that imagination, right? Everything's a fractal, a star in a star. And finally, I feel we have to understand this, we have to go beyond the mind. And that's where language is. And I'll come back to what you were referring to. The language comes from the mind, the culture, and say a brain, right? And our ability to speak. But once we've transcended that, Kakoli, there is silent communication. And in mycelium, it happens, communication is through silence. But whatever needs to happen happens. And that's why silence is such a big practice just for humans in a human ecosystem. And because that's when you can really hear what's needed, to come back into your balance. So once you're in balance, then the mycelium of what you've connected to will find its balance because you're open to giving and receiving without the mind or the ego restricting you. And I think for language, I feel in the same capacity, yes, in this body, in this culture, in this birth, it's very important for us to go back to our roots, to our language, to reconnect. But once the reconnection happens, it doesn't matter. So as much as I'm very, very connected to Punjabi, when I go to Punjab, I come alive because in this physical body of the Panchabhutas, I have a lineage and DNA of being Punjabi, like you have of being Bengali. But the minute we are connected to the whole mycelium of the cosmos, to the microorganisms, and we've shed this cultural identity, the identity of this birth, and we're just in this cycle of nature, impermanent, never born, never dying, then communication's happening all the time. And I can communicate with Kakuli just by shutting my eyes and sending you a message. And if you're in that space in you to receive it, that's telepathy. That's a mycelium network also, right? And why is it important for communities? Why is it important for eco-villages? Why people are using it in context of nature? And why do we need to reconnect? Because there has been a separation from this physical self, the emotional self, I would say the mental, intellectual self to the spiritual self. So can we create this mycelium where the meridians, the nadis can reconnect? And then the language is only of the heart and soul. You're in presence of a person. Sometimes it's just the energy field. You get all your messages that you need. So that's how I believe it happens under the soil because microorganisms and trees don't have a language. So as much as we aspire to have a cultural language that roots back to our lineage, ancestry, but once we've healed that and released that and become cosmic beings, that doesn't have a hold on our imagination. And that's where we are free to really create any canvas that we wish to.